So good afternoon.
Really appreciate it.
5 or 6 years ago when we started the company, we were probably the first sports-oriented venture, definitely out of Israel. And so I used to be invited to conferences to mix it up. So you would have tech companies presenting, and then I would go on stage to spice it up with some football. Obviously, the world has changed, and now I'm forced to go on stage after Yossi and Tony and the Maradona goal. So that makes me look bad on a relative basis. So again, coming from a deep technology background, I'm used to starting my presentations with some questions with the crowd. And so obviously today we'll focus on football. So how many of you are die-hard football fans, if I may ask? Okay. So probably half of you. How many of you came or went to watch Tottenham at Wembley last night or are going to watch Arsenal at the Emirates tonight? Okay, a few of you. I'm used to Israel is going to tech conferences after the big European games. Let's switch to some business questions. What is the richest European football league? So think about England, Spain, Germany, Italy, France. What's the richest football league in Europe? England. Okay, England. Good guess. So the English Premier League is making about £5 billion a year in total revenue. Most of it is going to Manchester United. The second richest, by the way, is the German and the Spanish are probably half that number. So related to that, how many English Premier League teams made it to the Champions League final over the last 5 years? 0. Okay, good. How many English players made it to the top 5 European plays, the Ballon d'Or, over the last 5 years? 0. Okay, that's very counterintuitive. Okay, so now before we start the presentation of the company that started in Israel, let's move on with a couple of questions related to Israeli football. When was the last time that Israel made it to the World Cup? Okay, so decades ago, before I was born. And for those of you who are interested in Israeli football, just for general knowledge, the last 2 home games that we played as part of the World Cup qualification games, we lost to Albania and Macedonia at home over the last couple of months. Okay, so then people ask me, okay, so why did you choose to start Minute Media 5-6 years ago out of Israel? So many of us are passionate about sports and football, but we're really bad at playing it. So we thought that using technology to take over digital football and sports could be a good way to find excuses to go watch football on weekend. And then we started Minute Media. We have now become probably the fastest growing digital media content platform in global sports. We have 3 brands within Minute Media. So the first one that is probably more known is 90min. 90min is now the #1 global sports publisher again, focusing on football. That we started that about 5-6 years ago. And then a year ago, we decided to extend the platform into the US, launching our second brand called 12Up. 12Up covers all the main American sports, NBA, NFL, MLB, college sports, and is now a top 10 sports platform in the US on ComScore. And then a couple of months ago, we had to follow the hype and launch our third brand in esports. It's called Double Tap. So if those of you who have not heard of esports, it's a new global sports phenomena of gamers, so console games and all types of online games that are being played competitively. We are one of the first global publishers to cover esports in a more professional fashion. Okay, so that's on the investing side. It's already kind of a later stage business. Right now, we've had all these investors. We've raised about $60 million so far. And as Yossi has mentioned earlier, what's interesting is that when we started the business, it was nearly impossible to raise money into sports. Again, back in late 2011, it was as impossible to raise money into media out of Israel, right? Israel doesn't have a local media market. So sports and media made it very, very difficult for us. Luckily, we had Battery Ventures jumping in for the seed run, and then Over time, we added more strategic and financial investors, and over the last 3 years, again, investing into sports, into media, into companies that come from Israel into that space is becoming more fashionable, so making our life a lot easier. Okay, so in terms of our global reach, we are currently serving about 75 million unique users a month. It's a fairly global distribution. Do you know what is the most active continent in terms of absolute number of Premier League fans? Asia. Okay, good guess. So in Asia, there are probably about 1.5 billion English Premier League fans, and Manchester United, by the way, is the most popular Premier League team in Asia. So by covering football, we had to build a very global platform out of, again, starting in Tel Aviv. We now cover all the main football markets in Europe, in Latin America, in Asia, and then in the US. Okay, so what has been driving our growth? When we started, what we have seen back then is a strategic transition in media where a lot of new content categories would be generated and created by what people used to call back then UGC, or user-generated content. And we figured back then in late 2011 that football and sports had the capacity to be one of that emerging UGC spaces because what you could do in sports, you can tap into so many fans who have the capacity to create high-quality content. Okay, so that's when I'm facing trouble when I speak on conferences of magazines or newspapers such as Kלכליסט, because one of the things that we have done over the last 5-6 years, we have really disrupted journalism, and now we have about 5,000 contributors or fan journalists around the world. They do create nearly 1,000 pieces of content every day in 12 different languages. It's all curated internally. Okay, so we have fans around the world coming to our platform, creating content. It could be video, it could be news, it could be opinions, but everything is curated by an internal team before it gets published. And unlike traditional journalists, we do not have to pay our contributors. They do it for the passion, and again, luckily, every one of us, football fans, who watch games, has so much passion to assume we know so much more than the managers, the commentators, the players, the journalists, so we just provided the technology and the platform and the distribution for those fans to come and create content on our sites. Okay, this is a typical journalist on the 90min brand. Okay, so as you can tell, it's a Manchester United fan. He has written over 6,000 pieces of content, could be articles and videos, on the platform. And in aggregate, I'm not making up the numbers, you can go and watch it online, the content has been consumed by over 130 million times, just to give a sense of the scale. And it can tell why these guys keep on coming to the platform, because if you finish watching a game and you create great content, which our technology allows you to do, you would get massive consumption, and that's what football or sports fans are looking for. Again, he's 23-year-old. We've never met him. We do not employ him. Probably never went to journalism school. But again, taking over the world as a young content creator. And that's a very typical example to what we see on the platform. Okay, so again, when we started, one of the questions we were asked by VCs, investors, potential partners was, how on earth are you going to make money when advertisers prefer to work with very credible publishers and media platforms? And so what we have seen over the last 3 years is actually the opposite. What we have seen is all the major advertisers want to tap into more authentic voice that is created by fans, by contributors, by new innovative platforms. And I wanted to give you an example of one of the campaigns, advertising campaigns that we've been running with Paramount, launching the movie Star Trek and Beyond. They've done it around the Euro that took place in France last year, and we have used our global fans and content creators to help push content related to that movie. So I'll just play that video.
licensed 6 countries, all out here blogging for you during Euro 2016.
That's right, thanks to Paramount, ahead of the film Star Trek Beyond. My name's Cheeky Sport Joe.
And I'm Cheeky Sport Dave.
We're out.
We are kicking off at Euro 2016, and it's amazing!
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ronaldo wins the European Cup with Portugal. The French are mad, they're going home. How did this happen? How did this happen?
Quick fire double. Well, the adventure is coming to an end.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. So again, those are real content creators, what we call in this case vloggers or video bloggers. There is more and more content moving into video and more advertising budgets moving into video. And what you see from brands who want to tap into our platform is the demand for that kind of content. Again, it did took place in the last Euro in Paris or in France last year. As you may assume, Israel has not participated. We never made it to the Euro. By the way, just an anecdote, when the European tournament started, there were 8 teams, and then we decided, as we in Israel, we started to play in Asia, because technically we were in Asia, and then we decided to move to Europe, to play in Europe. There were 8 teams in the Euro back then, and we never made it to the Euro, obviously. And then they increased the size of the tournament to 60 teams, 16. We still never made it to the Euro. They just increased it to, 24, 32? We still have not made it to the Euro, right? There are probably more teams playing than countries in Europe, and we still did not manage to make it to the Euro. Maybe next time, okay. What you see here is some of the logos of the brands, advertisers that work with us. So the way advertising on new media platforms work nowadays is direct selling to brands, native advertising, video advertising. So it has to be a fairly robust mix to make it into global scale. We're now selling tens of millions of dollars a year with some of the main names that you see there on the wall. And probably I'll skip the next video, Nimrod, because I see that I'm running out of time. But I was asked to come up with some predictions for what's next in media. So I'm assuming that if I'm invited to speak here again in probably 5 years' time, we'll be facing some of the following phenomena. So first, I guess that probably 90% of media and content will be consumed on mobile versus still probably 50-50 nowadays. I'm assuming that 60 to 70% of advertising budgets will be driven by video. I'm also assuming that if you're not a specialized newspaper or content player, such as Kלכליסט, for example, that focused on finance or business, you have a lot less chance to survive if you're not using technology. So I'm assuming that a lot of the general newspapers we're seeing nowadays will just go out of business. And specifically for sports, I think what we're seeing is that Facebook, Twitter, hopefully yourself sometime soon, are starting to enter the rights game. So in 5 years, we'll come here after we watched a Champions League match, probably over one of the digital media platforms, including Amazon, not necessarily on Sky or BT. So that's how we see it going forward. Thank you very much.